Death Doctor. Doctors were called angels of mercy, help them to the patient. But what if it is different? And the doctor now writes a death certificate instead of a prescription therapeutic for his patient. Killer Doctor and Angel of Death and several other titles. It was called a criminal today. But all these are just nicknames. We can't call it any criminal. The difference was every criminal he can kill 200 people and no one knows what happened and who are they. Where the criminal was careful even after discovering, not saying who the victims are. Who is he? And why did he kill all this one? And what was the opinion of the court? In 4 January 1946, Harold Frederick Shipman was born in Nottingham, was in a middle-class family, and was the second son for Frederick Shipman. Harold was known from a young age for his love for the medical field, and he was very affected by his mother, who was suffering from the disease of lung cancer, and it became in the later period takes a narcotic substance to numb the pain. When Harold turned 17, his mother died at 21 June 1963. Harold left after his mother's death outside Nottingham and returned again in 1957 to complete a high school in the city, and in his final year of school he served as deputy captain of the athletics team. On 5 November 1966, Harold married Primrose May Oxtoby and had 4 children later, and in 1970 graduated from the University of Leeds after studying in the field of medicine and received the title of physician. And in 1974, Harold took over as a general practitioner. All this was normal to happen and also doesn't cause concern. But what happened? Harold opened a private clinic for him in 1988 next to his work in the hospital, and many patients began to visit him and were received by his wife and gained a good reputation. And then confidence in Harold was very high, and this is because of his appearance in 1983 in a television interview in which he talks about his profession and helping psychiatric patients. But with the passage of some months, with the opening of the clinic, there has been a strange increase in deaths, especially among Harold's female patients of the elderly ladies, and the causes of death were many: old age, stroke, sudden death, and other reasons. Although the causes of death were frank and realistic to some extent, but raised concern when it is at one doctor. And began Linda Reynolds, who works at the medical center, Donbrook Medical Center, who was going through Harold's death, started worrying about him and turned to John Porter, a coroner in charge of South Manchester, who had the same suspicion of Harold, but they had nothing against him. But they told the police what had happened and left them the choice. But the police ignored when they couldn't reach enough evidence to charge him, and the police left the case on 14 April 1988. And several months later, the police received a call that Harold was responsible for the deaths of 21 of his patients. But also again, there was not enough evidence to imprison Harold. But what brought Harold down was completely unexpected evidence. So, what is it? Kathleen Grundy is an 81-year-old woman who was Harold's patient at a hospital where he worked besides her work in private practice, and she had a girl named Angel Woodruff who was a lawyer. On June 24, 1988, Angel was visiting her mother and sat with her until she was sure that her mother was okay and taking her treatment. Then she left, and after a while Kathleen died after Harold visited her at her home and gave her an injection of diamorphine and sat next to her until the last breath and left her. After Angel came home, she knew about her mother's death, but for her it was strange, as she had been with her for hours. But she finally accepted the situation and buried Kathleen. And when Angela knew that her mother had given Harold a check worth £386,000, here Angela couldn't bear the situation and decided to start an intensive investigation into Kathleen's death from the beginning and exhumed the body again after burial and did an autopsy, and it appeared that there was an overdose of the pain anesthetic classified like heroin inside the body, and from here Harold was imprisoned and interrogations began. On 7 September 1998, Harold was arrested and investigations began in Kathleen's case. At first, he denied what happened and didn't admit anything, and that the fake testimony was the real one, as Kathleen died of old age and showed them previous checks. But Harold's computer was exposed as the scan on the computer was recorded after Kathleen's death, and the forged certificate was carried out by Harold using a handwriting machine. When the police found this, Harold didn't believe it and began investigating Harold's latest death, and the bodies began to be exhumed and several tests were conducted, and they discovered that the cause of death was overdoses of the pain anesthetic diamorphine, and in the fake death certificate it is written in it that the cause of death is that she was in poor health, and from here he proved on Harold a case of forgery in death certificates and also the murder of 15 elderly women, and he didn't confess to killing anyone. But when the police began investigations into Harold's place, they discovered that the number of his crimes exceeded 250 cases, all of them elderly. The trial began on 5 October 1999, and he was accused of killing only 15 cases, all between 1995 and 1998. But on 31 January, Harold was sentenced to 15 murders and only one case of perjury, and the sentence was to life imprisonment with a recommendation not to release him at all with 4 years in prison for forgery. 10 days after Harold's imprisonment was written off his name in it from the records of the General Medical Council, and despite all this, Harold was defending himself and not being responsible for the death of patients. On 13 January 2004, Wakefield prison pronounced Harold dead at 8:10 in the morning, hanging himself in his cell with the crawls of the bars of his cell window at 6:20 in the morning, and Harold died at the age of 58.